Good morning and welcome to everyone. I'm Garnet Smith, and along with Ellen Getz, we're going to moderate or be the MCs this morning for this celebration of life for Denny. Before we start with the Lord's Prayer, though, however, the Genung and Taylor families wanted me to tell you how much they appreciate all the support that they've received over the past 6 weeks. It's been extraordinary. And each and every one of you here today, they want to say thank you. They're incredibly appreciative that you've come today, and many of you have come from long distances to be here to celebrate Denny's life. So thanks from the family. Now, if you would please stand with me, we'll recite the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
What a beautiful morning for a celebration of Denny's life. I'm Ellen Getz, and I am honored to gather here with you, her family and friends, to remember her with laughter and love, and yes, probably a few tears. As you can see in the program, Garnet and I will lead us along a delightful path of Denny's life through tributes from friends and family, accompanied by some music of personal meaning to her, which is how Denny lived and what Denny loved. Fred and his family have received so many letters and emails that glow with the essence of Denny, and they've selected just a few to be read today by myself and Garnet, and some special people in Denny's life will speak about Denny. Maggie Peacock, good friend and traveling companion, and soul sister to Denny, will be the first to speak.
Denny, our friend. Just saying her name makes you smile. And you immediately see a striking woman with amazing hair pulled back by one of her many elastic bands, which she stored on the handle of her hairbrush. Denny, thanks for the tip. Reading glasses perched on her head, a simple white t-shirt. Actually, not so simple. Neckline had to be of the proper height. Fit and quality of fabric was essential. Sweaters, cashmere. Excuse me. Lovely colors, pants, Le Jardin. Thanks, Denny, for the correct pronunciation. Shoes flats, Belgians or not, and of course, her pearls and her lovely gold chain. Old school, new school, or was it Denny school? It does not matter. Her style and grace in what she wore and the way she lived was wondrous, marvelous, enjoyable, joyful. She loved life. God, she was fun. Oh yes, and late. She had wonderful friends, and she introduced me to many, and for that, I am grateful. Being introduced by Denny was like getting the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. She always made you feel good. And it goes without saying that she loved her family and her Freddie. She was a news junkie. She loved politics. She loved the conversation. I do not need to get into what newspapers, etc., she favored. Some of you may know that Denny and I had our annual, sometimes biannual, trips to Palm Beach, quote, to go shopping, unquote. It was 8+ hours of glorious unloading, talking about everything under the sun and just catching up on life. We would meet at the local mall at 8 a.m. She was never late. We'd arrange our water bottles and off we would go. Someone might say that we no doubt were talking at 80 to 90 words per minute, with gusts up to 120. Oh, and yes, we did get some shopping in. As a matter of fact, we never left Palm Beach without Denny acquiring a new pearl necklace and or a new set of pearl earrings. Thanks, Denny, for your advice regarding what I might consider not wearing. Before Denny and Fred went to Boston, there was mention that she may have had tuberculosis. So we made a plan. The four of us would travel to Switzerland. Actually, Fred and John were unaware of this plan. And we would go to Zermatt, St. Moritz. You get the idea. And Denny and I would lounge on a sun porch overlooking the Alps, wrapped in mink and dressed in Bogner. Of course, it was not tuberculosis. When the results and prognosis was determined, Denny, in her matter-of-fact, straightforward, well thought out, strong, determined, EMS-trained, though emotional way, told us what was up. Or maybe it was, here's the deal. She said she had lived her life on her terms. And she was at peace, and for us to please take care of her Freddie. I would have liked for us to grow, old together. Denny, thanks for everything. You will always be in my heart. And thank you, Fred, Kate, Alec, and all, for having me stand here today to talk about our friend Denny. Thanks.
Thank you, Maggie. And now I begin with a letter written by Kai Collins, who is daughter Kate Taylor's freshman year roommate at Williams College. Kai had not spoken to Denny in over 15 years, yet her writing demonstrates the deep bond both Denny and Fred formed with all of Kate and her brother Alec's childhood friends. Dear Denny, for the rest of my life, molasses cookies will always make me think of Denny Genung. My freshman fall at Williams could not have felt further from my California home, geographically or socially. I'd yet to make the friends who'd be my dearest for life. For the first time ever, I wasn't getting straight A's. My parents couldn't make the cross-country trip for Parents' Weekend, and my dear Noni would be there, but not until after she'd spend the day working. Lucky me, I had a roommate whose name required a lengthy explanation, but whose parents arrived early that October morning. they swept us up in our tiny room in Morgan West and bought us fresh, warm molasses cookies with giant sugar sprinkles from Clarksburg Bakery on Spring Street, en route to the one and only football game I ever attended at Williams. Fred had cool glasses and was charming and funny. You embraced me and were gracious and warm and sparkled from within. You seemed old school and elegant, and from a secret world where endless charm and intelligence, not to mention catalog good looks and style, were innate. I recall our dinner at Mill on the Floss restaurant. You and Fred graciously invited Noni and me as your guests. It was fun and lively and special, but at the moment at which Fred asked Noni about the gubernatorial situation in New York, there was a pause. And I panicked that my high school educated grandma from a small town in upstate New York didn't know what gubernatorial meant. To this day, I still don't know if you even picked up on this, but I always remember my relief when you jumped in to offer your opinions on various candidates and Noni was able to dive into the conversation. As well as my delight when at a subsequent dinner, you ordered a Jack on the Rocks, which seems so sophisticated yet totally badass to me. Actually, nearly all my memories of you surround delicious meals and delightful conversation, whether at a small, cherished spot in Williamstown, elegant dining at Zuni Cafe in San Francisco, or snacks in the new room at your lovely Connecticut home. You evoke feelings of warmth, care, and timeless grace that will forever be special to me. Molasses cookies with giant sugar sprinkles, the best ever. Dinny Genung, the loveliest ever. All my love, Kai. This letter is from Cindy Lago, who was a longtime Connecticut housekeeper for Fred and Dinny, and for more than 20 years became a good friend. Dear Dinny, it has always been my joy to work for you and your family. There are very few people who appreciate what I do and tell me so. You are one of those people. After you interviewed me that first time, I went back and told Hitchie, my friend, I don't know if I can work for Mrs. Genung. She has eyes that look right into a person's soul, and she makes you talk. Hitchie said, yes, she does, but you'll get used to it. It's so unfair that such a good person could get such a bad and painful illness. I'm so sorry. I love you. And as you asked, you didn't have to, I will always be there to do anything your Freddie or anyone else in your family needs. You have always been such a good friend to me. It's the least I can do. I only wish I could turn back the clock. Love, Cindy. And now we have a special treat for you. I'm going to ask Garnet to bring up my prop. And the following was actually taped by Nick Beckwith, who was unexpectedly called away today, and he can't be here in person. And he and his wife, Dottie, are longtime friends of Dinny's and Fred's. So this is Lou. I'm going to hold Lou while the tape rolls.
Fred, Alec, Lee, Kate, and Prescott, members of the Genung and Riggs families, and the many, many friends gathered here today. Let me first express most sincere apologies for my absence today, both from the podium as well as from what I know is an appropriately grand and fitting celebration of a life truly worth celebrating. in honoring me by asking that I participate in remembering our dear friend Denny, Fred set only 2 ground rules. First, that I not dally, as I was to be one of just a number of speakers, and second, that I use remembrances of those good old days to capture Denny in ways which made us all love her, a love which will never disappear with time. On the podium, you will see a friend of Denny's. His name is Little Lou. Lou is still festooned with a yellow ribbon as he once was posing for a photo sent to Denny early last month as a way of expressing our profound hope for Denny's early return to Naples. Lou, with or without a ribbon, brings a sense of life to an old story which, while having been told many times by many people over the years, was one also shared with Denny during a dinner party hosted by Denny and Fred at their superb home along the shores of Little Moose Lake within the Adirondack League Club. Now, given that today is a gathering of Denny enthusiasts, everyone knows that most stories ever receiving a Denny endorsement, and remember, the spicier the story, the bigger the endorsement. But any story making Denny's list has to have a lot of punch in the punchline. This story may possibly qualify, and consistent with Fred's first instruction on brevity, the story has been shortened, but more importantly, somewhat sanitized, with the hope of offending no one, or at worst, only a very few. So, this is the story of Little Lou. In the strangest of ways, Little Lou was born into this world with just a neck and a head. No arms, no legs, no torso. Despite this misfortune, Lou was loved by his parents and admired by his friends. Birthdays were special occasions celebrated with numerous presents and fanfare. On Lou's 6th birthday, his parents decided to make the day even more special by limiting gifts to just one very special package. Along with ice cream and cake, this very special package was presented to Lou, who, after evaluating the possible contents based upon the box's size and shape, said to his parents, now I'm going to stop here for just a second. Let's everybody remember our buddy Lou came into this world head and neck only. His folks give him a big special present on this special birthday. Lou evaluates the contents, maybe nudging it with his nose to gauge what's inside, and then, and only then, says, Mom and Dad, I sure hope it's not another frigging hat. There was never anything artificial about Denny. She liked what she liked, loved what she loved, and there was no changing any of that. So the morning after the dinner party, yours truly being an early riser, I tiptoed into the kitchen only to find Denny already at work making breakfast for her house guests. Being unaware of my presence, Denny was quietly singing an old song when, without the slightest warning, Denny stopped, started to laugh with gusto that you could not believe, and then shouted out for nobody to hear, I hope it is not another frigging hat. And that laughter continued on and on. And then to properly capture the moment and a weekend spent with good friends, Denny went later that day to a funny little curio shop in Old Forge, New York, and found this funny little guy who is now our friend Lou. Denny had a love of life, a joie de vivre, and it was truly a joy to witness. When she found something beyond and above exceptional and truly worthy of cherishing, in this instance, think of Fred, first and foremost, but certainly Kate and Alec, spouses and grandchildren as well. When Denny found something to cherish, she held onto it with extraordinary intensity. She drew from life the very best, everything it ever had to offer. All of us here, and many scattered around the country, have loved Denny for many, many years in the past. We love her today, and we will love her forevermore. Denny, rest easily. You deserve your time in heaven. You have changed our lives abundantly for the better, and for that we thank you. And Fred, Alec, and Kate, Lee, and Prescott, know that you occupy very special and enduring places in the hearts of everyone.
Thank you. I'd never met Lou before. So I'm going to begin again and read a couple of more letters, and then we're going to have some more speakers. So this letter was sent to Fred from Stan Boynton, who is the former director in the Naples office of the Everglades Foundation. Dear Fred, this morning Ellen sent me a note and the sad news. I am stunned, absolutely stunned. I greatly admired both you and Denny. You were an exceptional couple, and your wife was an extraordinary person. By her support alone, she made my job worthwhile. She was an inspiration, a confidant, and a trusted advisor. It goes without saying that in a community of do you know who I am, she stood alone and way above. Since I arrived in this small coastal town in Colombia on my Peace Corps service, I have been thinking about who to write among the people I met through the foundation. I considered quite a few people to be friends in Naples. I finally decided that I would write to you and Denny and see what happened. Denny was the one person in Naples who could understand where I am and what I am doing. Furthermore, I wanted to tell her, and now she is gone. She was an exceptional person in her simplicity, honesty, and integrity. In a community where many people are trying to convince others how successful, wealthy, and influential they are, Denny was a breath of fresh air, not concerned about being successful and influential, but she was, nevertheless, due to how she lived her life. Then I'd like to invite Dusty Tuttle up to speak. Dusty is a friend of 45 years plus, both from Connecticut and Naples.
First of all, I'd like to thank Nick in absentia and Maggie. It was beautiful and poignant, and you described Denny perfectly. Let me try the same from a male perspective, if I might. This will be either one of the more difficult things that I have ever done, or one of the easiest. The more difficult because a very special person and a dear, dear friend of ours has left our company before we were all ready to see her go. Or easy because those wonderful memories of her will endure in our minds and hearts forever. I called her Diana, and she me Donald. Yet if the conversation had slightly more serious overtones, it was dins and dust. Olivia and I were blessed to have known Diana Riggs Genung for some 43 years. That is why this is easy. Let me share just a few of those early memories with you. Hosting jukebox New Year's Eve parties until 4 in the morning. Yes, we did stay up that late back then. The next afternoon, feeling the worse for wear, and in a driving ice storm, we had to return that jukebox to the jig at Taft School. Well, we lost control of it as it started to slide down the hill. Someone yelled, run away, we have a jukebox runaway. Well, that 700-pound jukebox got a little heavy to move around, so we moved on to live music. Rolling Stone concerts with Mick and the boys were the best, and now we were home by 2 in the morning. Now, some of you here today participated in the next event. You went to it, but did not play in it. The 1980 Winter Olympics. We are driving the 96 miles from the Genung's camp at the Adirondack League Club to Lake Placid, with tickets in hand to watch the USA play Norway in a hockey game to advance to the medal round. We were psyched as we entered a basically empty arena to discover that it was a Group B consolation game between, I think, China and Yugoslavia. Right tickets to the right arena, the game just happened to be in the other sold-out venue. Well, we watched that game at some mobbed, rundown bar. The good news was that we went on to advance to the medal round and play the Russians. And you know what happened next. Sailing bareboat in the BVIs with Captain Fred at the helm and First Mate Denny by his side. The Wooby 2 was a fine boat and would have accommodated Denny, Fred, Olivia, and Dusty quite nicely. But we also had 6 children aboard, ranging in ages from 7 to 16. It also rained continuously for the first 5 days of a week's trip. We had so many wet towels and wet pieces of clothing hanging from the deck that we looked like a floating inner-city tenement project. It did not matter. We had a ball. The Rolling Stones' Start Me Up was revelry to get the kids moving in the morning. And then on the 6th day, the sun finally came out, and we threw the anchor down next to a larger boat that had just 3 people on board, Mr. and Mrs. Walter Cronkite and their grandson. And that's the way it was in March of 1989. As a family, we played lots of games and contests for gophers. Now, for those of you that don't know what a gopher is, that is when the loser of an event owes the winner a chore of his or her choice. A very valuable commodity indeed. Well, years ago, I was so enslaved to Denny that I tried to invoke the Emancipation Proclamation. She just looked me in the eye, smirked, and said, "Boy, just get ready to do some real women's work." And most importantly, as the years went by, the Tuttles and the Genungs had the pleasure of watching all of our children grow up and produce the next circle of life. It has been said that it is not the years in your life that counts, but the life in those years that matters most. Whoever wrote those words had Denny in mind. So let me take you through each of those letters that spells her magical name, starting with D. Definite in her opinion, but not defiant in listening to yours. I, an individual who is true to her beliefs and loyal to her friends. I only saw her stray once, and it was a sad day. That is when she left our common friend, Jack Daniels, for Heineken. But I must say that she would drink that beer right out of the bottle, and as only Denny could, do it in such a ladylike fashion. N, never discourteous nor negligent to anyone, nice to all, and never got mad at Fred. Well, on second thought, there were those times that Fred erred, and he became Fred with lots of E's in his name. Now, if the crime was a little more egregious, then he would put her glasses up here, hands on hip, and he was Jesus Fred with lots of E's and Jesus. And again, never, when skiing, get to the slopes too early, and never ski more than 1 run after lunch. In time, lunch began at around 11:30. If there was one thing that Denny was always early to, it was après-ski. In bridge, Denny would never try a finesse if the contract was in hand. She could do the Jacoby transfer in her sleep. That card game became her favorite pastime. It was a game at which she excelled. Now, I never dared play it against her because I did not want a return trip to Gopher City. And why? Yet to be on time to a cocktail party, and yet we were so happy to see her when she arrived. Yes, to always being there for her children and grandchildren. Mom to Alec, Kate to Din Din, Mom to Alec and Kate, and Din Din to Lucy, Chip, Ellie, and Caroline. Yes, to having so many friends, as we can see by being here today. And yes, thank you to my longtime and great friend Fred for asking me to do this easy, difficult task. It has been an honor.
I'm going to now read a letter from Beatrice Olson, who's a Connecticut doctor who actually posted this to her website blog, and she calls it Elegant Endings. One of my patients died this week. I met her 10 years ago because she had a thyroid nodule. She was an interesting person and beautifully elegant lady. She came to the office 1 to 2 times a year, always wearing a cashmere sweater. Aside from the routine thyroid discussions, we talked about her life, her perceptions, her emotional events, our children, her lovely marriage, where and how to live well in retirement, and how to age beautifully. Her last visit was 3 months ago. She brought tests from her primary care doctor. All was well. She was wearing a lovely cashmere sweater, and her full gray-white hair shimmered and added great contrast to her look. I told her I would like to look and feel so well when I get to her age. She laughed and said, I'd probably look better. Last week, she called my office to say goodbye and to thank me for being her doctor. She had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and her body was riddled by it. She wanted to discuss with me her decision to enter hospice, even though her condition had nothing to do with endocrine issues. We talked about the times we had shared and how meaningful these had been for both of us. We talked about the remarkable remissions that have been observed in some advanced cancers, and also about elegant endings. She chose the latter. It suited her. She died well, surrounded by the people she loved. She was elegant to the end. I am privileged to have been her doctor and her friend. Sometimes we do not understand the impact we make on each other until the end. I am grateful for her kindness to connect with me one last time, and deeply saddened that I will not see her again. And this is another beautiful piece written by Joe Turville, who is here today with us, and was one of Denny's first friends in Naples. And they remained in regular, loving contact despite Joe moving to New Hampshire 10 years ago. They saw each other a couple of times a year, and she and Denny took a wonderful trip to France together. She last visited Denny when she was in hospice care. I remember meeting the Genungs for the first time. A mutual friend brought us together by saying, "You're gonna love them." And I did. Who knows how these things happen, why people are drawn to each other. We were all fairly new to Naples and had similar interests, but that doesn't always translate into deep friendships. Maybe Denny and I became friends because we both shared a reverence for white cotton sheets, and were sort of groupies for the Broadway singer Barbara Cook. However it happened, her friendship has been an important part of my life. I love that she treated everyone with equal respect. She was as nice to the garbage man as she would have been to the governor. She could enjoy a peanut butter sandwich in the kitchen as easily as a 6-course dinner at Le Cordon Bleu. I loved that she appreciated well-made things, the cut of an Armani suit, a beautiful flower, and a job well done. Always complimentary. How many times did I hear her say, "Oh, that is so nice"? She was an excellent travel companion, easy and eager, sharing her observations and always aware of the details. The last time we talked, she expressed how very lucky she felt to have been able to live the life she had. She had a husband she loved, children and grandchildren she adored, and a comfortable life. Never judgmental, and knowing that we are promised nothing in this life, she said she was choosing to try to accept gracefully what had happened to her and get on with it. Hard words to hear, but she was very clear. I will remember her in khakis, white t-shirt and pearls with that wild Denny hair pulled back with a rubber band. She was uniquely and unmistakably herself. A perfect combination of kindness, grit, self-confidence, and humility. She was the best kind of sassy. Losing her is inconceivable. And then this is from Fred's sister, Sally Booth, who is with us today with her family from Westfield, New Jersey. Dear Fred, I feel blessed and privileged to have had 2 conversations with Denny in the last week that were surprisingly lively, interesting, and meaningful. I wish I had a recording of them, but I shall always remember them. Leave it to her to make me feel better. She has always been such an important part of my life. Fred, you did the best thing you could have ever done when you married her. Love, Sally. Now I'd like to invite a cousin, Annie Hance, who's now living in Chattanooga, to come up and speak.
I know and I think I can speak for my siblings and my cousins when I say that we all feel incredibly lucky to have grown up with the Genungs. Weekends in Woodbury and on the Jersey Shore, ski trips and sailing trips, we had a lot of fun together. Every summer for 6 or 7 years running, Denny and Mom would pack up the Volvo station wagon, put a couple of kids in the back seat, me and Katie in particular, and drive not once but twice to Vermont in 2 weeks so that we could go to camp together. The kids were in the way back, having kid time and loving it, and Mom and Denny were in the front seat, loving their girl time. If you asked me then why I loved being around Denny so much, I probably would have shrugged my shoulders and said, she's the best. I'm not sure I could have articulated then why I felt so special around her. I think it was because she made me feel so special. She was so interested in me and what I was doing and what I was interested in. As I grew up and began to understand that I could pick my role models and the characteristics of people I wanted and still want to emulate, Denny's at the top of that list. There are so many reasons why, and it's, of course, because I still felt so special when I was with her that I realized that was such an important quality that I wanted to carry forward. And there's so many other characteristics, but her graciousness is one that stands out for me. You know that anyone who hosts not once, not twice, but 3 times, upwards of 50 people spanning 3, sometimes 4 generations of their in-laws for reunions in Little Moose has a tremendous amount of grace. And Denny would also engage in political discussions with the conservative wing of the family, which essentially meant it was Denny versus 95% of the family. And she would engage with the discussions with such passion and grace that everyone still wanted to eat and drink and be merry with Denny when those discussions had ended. But as I prepared these remarks, I kept coming back to Fred and Denny. Denny and Fred. It's the 2 of them always together. and a wonderful example of how 1 + 1 = 200. I remember arriving in Woodbury one February for a Hans Genung family long weekend. On the counter was a beautiful bouquet of red roses, and you could read "To Dinny" on the card that was peeking out. I turned to Katie and said, "Wow, Katie, your dad sent your mom a beautiful bouquet of red roses for Valentine's Day." And Katie looked at me and shook her head and said, "No, they're from the dog." Well, I read the card, and sure enough, they were from the dog. "Katie, I need a little help here. Why is the dog sending your mom red roses?" "Well," she said, "Mom was really mad at Dad because the dog ate Mom's shoes, so the dog sent Mom red roses to say he was sorry." That was Fred and Dinny and Fred. But I think one of my most wonderful memories of Dinny is from about 15 years ago here in Naples. And I was visiting Fred and Dinny for a few days, and Dinny and I were sitting at the pool with our legs dangling in the water, talking about all those things that are important to a 25-year-old girl, which basically meant boys. And I asked Dinny during the course of the conversation how she met Fred. And a wistful look appeared in her face, and she smiled as she described meeting him during a spring break in college. Their two circles overlapped. He was this bigger-than-life personality, and the first night they stayed up all night talking. And I asked her when she knew he was the one, and the smile got a little bit bigger, and she said, "That first night." And sure enough, it was Fred and Dinny and Fred.
That was beautiful. A letter from Peggy Clute, who is a lifetime Adirondack Little Moose friend, who is here with us today with her husband Warren from Boulder, Colorado. Dear Dinny, for many years I have admired you from afar. Our mothers were good friends, and I always thought at some point we would become good friends. Our relationship slowly deepened over time as we experienced one great Little Moose experience after another. I don't know of a better way to bond. I was always inspired by your decorating skills and your impeccable taste in furniture and antiques. I showed interest, and you nicely invited me over and welcomed me into your camp, and were so willing to share any and all resources. That was a great day, and I knew I wanted to see more of you and become a closer friend. In this day and age, it has become an unusual circumstance to know multiple generations of someone's family, to grow up 1 mile from each other, to share a lifetime of activities, so many parties, events, and family gatherings together, a true gift in this life. We have been blessed to have 4 generations of our family grow up side by side, living 1 mile from each other. Nothing comes to my mind that trumps any other situation where this is possible. We have been truly blessed to be given the Little Moose family experience to share. I feel so fortunate and thankful that you have been in my life. I thank you always for being available, always ready with a witty response, always a smile on your face, always sharing one of the best senses of humor around, and always a heart full of love for all of us. We hold you in our hearts. We love you dearly. We are now going to join good friend from Little Moose, Carol Price, to sing Amazing Grace.
My husband's Ted's family and Denny's family were at Little Moose together for probably 3 or 4 generations, and their camp was right across the lake from our camp, and we watched all of them play and grow up as we rode on that lake and did everything together all summer long. But in the last few years, Denny and I had gotten really, really close, probably a lot because of bridge, and the children were bigger, and we had time to really spend with Denny and Fred. So golf and bridge and the lake, and like all the rest of you, I felt so cheated. I mean, we adored her, and she is now our special angel up there, full of grace, as all of you so eloquently have said this morning. And so I hope you will join me now, and you have the words in your program, and I will start singing, and you come in as you feel moved, okay? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already gone. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will bring me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Thank you.
Carol, that was beautiful. Thank you for that song. And while we're thanking people, I also want to thank the Genung family, in particular Kate and Fred, Ellen Getz, Maggie Peacock, the staff here at the Botanical Gardens, and in particular, a lady named Kathy Wheeler, who without her, I don't think this would have all come together. And she has been very instrumental in getting this organized, as well as other events during the weekend. And she's done a superb job, and I know the family would want to thank her. You know, it's a beautiful day, and I think Denny might have had something to do with this. The sun is shining, but also I think she might have had something to do with the rain the last few days, because it's so much rain it closed the golf courses. So I see a lot of golfers here today that, you know, might not otherwise be here. But anyway, no, I think this is a real testament to just how many people she touched. I was looking at this crowd and thinking, you know, if this was for me, I don't believe I could draw a crowd like this if the word got out we were giving out $100 bills at the door. It's really incredible, and all these people came from out of town, and you know, I think there's 55 family members, which is incredible. So anyway, so you heard Ellen say earlier that the family had received a number of letters and cards and all kinds of expressions of sympathy, and it was really hard going through all of these to try to figure out what we could read. And you know, we could go on forever. This could be like a Southern Baptist tent revival, and you know, we could be here 4 or 5 hours, I think, you know, if we read them all. But So in the spirit of time, we had to cut things down. So I was thinking about just the things that I could tell about Denny. And I could go on for quite a while, but I've kind of picked two stories out that kind of, to me, sum up Denny. Denny and I are from different worlds. She is the consummate northerner. And as you might can tell, those of you that hadn't met me, I am from the South. And so anyway, I think she always found me a little bit of amusing because, you know, I was from a different world from her. And she seemed to really, though, embrace, you know, what the Southern culture and that type of thing. And she would drive back and forth to Connecticut every year from Florida with Fred, and they would always take a different route every year, and they would sort of explore. And so they would go a different way, and whenever they got to a town, you know, they'd like to get into, you know, really understand the town, you know, go find the offbeat restaurant and, you know, talk to the people and all of that, and they would call me on the phone when they were driving up, or vice versa, and they didn't have anything to do, and neither did I. So I'd talk to them for about an hour, and I'd tell them, you know, what they'd be seeing and all of that. And one time they were on their way to Charlotte to go to the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And I'm thinking, you know, now this does not sound too much like Denny to me, but so anyway, so I had to tell her, of course, I said I gave her a few famous NASCAR drivers that she would no doubt, you know, run into and, you know, have exhibits or memorials to. And so I gave her a little education on the way up there. But one time she was headed back from Connecticut, and it was the last weekend of October. And that happens to be the Georgia-Florida football game. Every year in Jacksonville, billed as the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. So she was coming down through Georgia. She was in Brunswick, near Sea Island, and she had been seeing all of these Georgia flags flying on the cars and everything, and they stopped for the night at the hotel, and she was telling me about all these Georgia people. And now, for those of you that don't know anything about SEC football, it's a pretty serious thing. It's sort of a cultural phenomenon, and people, for a big game like this, they start getting ready on about Wednesday. So there was lots of partying and lots of drinking, and she saw all these people that were dressed up in red and black and had the Georgia flags. And of course, I'm a longtime University of Georgia football fan, so I was, you know, telling her a little bit about this. And I said, now listen, Denny, I know you like to get in with a crowd and everything. And I said, so tonight in the bar, you just go up to one of those guys, you know, good old boys in the bar, and say, how about them dogs? And she said, what? I said, yeah, listen, just say, how about them dogs? And they'll immediately identify with you, and you'll be in with them. I said, so try it. She said, okay. She said, how about them dogs? I said, no, that's not it. That's not it at all. I said, listen to me. I said, it's, how about them dogs? And she said, oh, okay, I got it. How about them dogs? I said, Denny, this is not working. There's too much Yankee in you. I said, listen, you'll have to get in with them another way. You'll have to use your considerable charm, but this will not work. And so this was 6 or 7 years ago, and ever since then, you know, she'd know I'd be watching a Georgia game on a Saturday, and she'd say, how about them dogs? She never learned how to say it. But anyway, now the other story is that, you know, I really believe that Denny Genung missed her calling in life, because she should have been an interrogator at Guantanamo Bay. Because this woman could ask 1,000 questions. I mean, it's unbelievable. And had she been down there, I believe we would have gotten more intelligence out of those people. But Denny would ask a question, and that was just the beginning. You know, she'd ask one, and then she'd drill down and ask another one and everything. And I can't even imagine being Alec and Kate, growing up and doing something slightly wrong as a teenager and going through the inevitable interrogation that had to follow. But one time, or actually this fall, I had a little issue with a cut on my leg. And of course, Denny, being concerned about me, got on to me one night. She said, well, what are you doing about it? And I said, well, I'm doing this. And she said, what have you thought about this? And what did the doctor say about this? Have you had that test? Well, what are you putting on it? And I realized she was really doing this for my benefit, because she gave me all of the questions to ask when I next met with the doctor. So that was her way of preparing me. But anyway, she was a wonderful person, and she loved her family and she loved her friends. And when I think of Denny, I think of someone who's loving, who's caring, who's compassionate, who's thoughtful, deliberate, very intelligent, very interesting, very poised, an elegant person. But if I think of one word that describes Denny Genung to me, it would be genuine. That girl was genuine. What you saw is what you got. And she was the real deal. She was the real deal. And I'm going to miss her a lot. So, the next reading is actually some thoughts that my wife Bitsy put together. Now, a little background on Bitsy and Denny. They're great friends, and they would walk all the time down in the neighborhood, down in Galleon Drive. And when they walked, there was never a shortage of conversation. I mean, those girls could talk, and I actually believe that their jaws got more exercise than their legs. But anyway, they became great friends, and I will say that their friendship actually cost Fred and me quite a bit of money, because they would just get each other ginned up, and they'd talk about all the stuff that was wrong with the house and what needed redecorating and remodeling. And hell, Fred and I never stood a chance. We were like collateral damage, we were just sitting ducks. So. But their friendship was a strong one, even though it was a costly one to us. But anyway, so these are Denny's thoughts about Denny. Bitsy's thoughts about Denny. She says, I was trying to remember exactly how my walks with Denny began. My golden retriever that I had walked every day had died, so I was looking for a new friend to walk with. A great thing ended up happening to me as I replaced one loyal companion with another. Denny and I were rather an odd couple in many ways. She was from the Northeast and I'm a Southerner. However, she was the slowest talking Northerner I ever met. Denny was liberal and I'm conservative, so we knew to avoid that subject. She was always late and I'm always on time. After a few times of showing up at her house to begin the walks, I think Denny saw my impatience and her inability to be ready, and she transformed herself into being amazingly punctual. Who said people can't change? We always enjoyed discussing bridge hands we'd played the previous day and just life in general. We became very close friends during the past several years, and I quickly realized she was one of the most caring friends a person could have. There were several times my back went out and Denny would always rush over with muscle relaxers, pain medication, and good medical advice. When I had a difficult situation arise, she was very thoughtful in helping me solve it and always offered good advice. Denny had a wide circle of friends and she always went out of her way to be kind to everyone. Time was of no importance when she was having a conversation or listening to people's problems. I've been amazed since Denny's death to hear how many people she touched, always thinking of others and not herself, a kinder and more gracious person you could never find. My forever picture in my mind of Denny is after at the bridge table all day wearing her cashmere sweater, no matter how hot it was, a strand of pearls, her glasses on her head, and numerous strands of her hair falling out of her ponytail. As meticulous as she was, her hair just made me chuckle. When I spoke with Denny during the last few weeks of her life, I was amazed at her acceptance of her devastating situation. In spite of everything, her concern was for her family she would be leaving behind. I was shedding tears, but she was holding it together. She told me she was at peace, which was comforting to know. It was such an inspiration to see how brave a person could be in that situation. Every time I walk down Galleon Drive, I will think of my dear friend Denny. I'm going to miss her terribly. Bitsy. This next letter is from Sherry O'Hearn, who's a friend here in Naples, a longtime friend, and her husband is Mike, or Mikey, as she calls him. And Sherry writes, yesterday I came across your bridge name tag on the little tray. I stopped and stared at it for a brief moment. Then I hope, if you don't mind, I picked it up out of the tray and carried it to a quiet place. As I unfolded my fingers and just held it, reflecting for a moment, I saw you almost 20 years ago playing tennis. Denny, I have so many wonderful memories. My impression of you and my first conversation with you. Do you mind if I share a few? On first blush, my first impression was your wonderful boyish figure. Whether you were playing tennis, golf, riding a bike, you always looked so classic and clean cut. You were the standard. You were athletic, yet so feminine. Always your lovely strand of pearls and cashmere sweater. A New England aristocrat. Coming from Texas, where so many gals were overcooked and not always sincere, you were truly refreshing and amazing. Watching you and Fred enter a room was quite special. With all warm smiles and friendly manner, you were everyone's friend. Being the lovely lady from Connecticut, needless to say, Mikey was immediately smitten. You and Freddie together simply spoke Mikey's language. He would often comment on how kind and thoughtful you were to follow up with a call, knowing Mikey had been sick and you had prescribed some remedy. Yes, Denny, the sincere interest and the limitless time you gave to listen to others' problems and stories is one of your biggest trademarks. I can see you standing, looking intently into the face of another while you listened to whatever was being said. That person had your total and undivided attention, period. Fondly enough, your precious Kate has your exact mannerisms. I love the fact that we saw you and Fred in Montana and shared our family with you. I love the fact that Kate and Mark attended Williams together, or Williams College. I love the fact that we were invited to Little Moose and saw Fred and Kate coming across the lake to be given away by her father to her new husband-to-be. I love the fact that you stayed true to yourself, wearing a mother of the bride dress that you felt was appropriate. I love the fact that we have shared a love of bridge, but most of all, my dear Denny, I love being your friend. I always have and always will. You will remain in my heart. Love, Sherry. Now I'd like to invite John Madsen up to the podium. John's Fred's oldest cousin and lives in Essex, Connecticut, and also Vero Beach. He's a retired physician and is responsible for Fred heading south to attend UNC. He's one of 55 family members here today, including his wife, Wendy, and 3 children. John.
You may hear me repeat a few of the themes you've been hearing, and I hope you will not look at it as repetition, but reinforcement of the great character of this real deal. As you know, Denny was very insightful and had a keen intellect. A conversation I had with her years ago exemplified those assets. Denny and Fred were hosting a family reunion at the Adirondack Little Moose Camp. And I walked into the kitchen in the early morning. There was Denny, still in her sleeping attire, trying to set up an assortment of breakfast options for her 40 guests. Her hair was flying, kind of like it might when she was having fun at a late Saturday night party. As you know, with her hair pulled back, she was stately, even regal. But with either hairdo, when her eyes focused on you, you immediately felt the connection and gave her your full attention. Poor Fred never had a chance when he met this woman. and surrendered his admiration and love quickly. So when Denny's eyes focused on me that morning, I knew she didn't want to talk about weather. Denny seemed to think that because I was a physician, I knew more about the working of the mind than what I learned in anatomies or biochemistry, which was not the case. She asked me a question related to her analysis of our parental behavior. The question might have been, how does a parent find the answers about how to solve the problems with our children? She phrased the question in such a way that she provided the answer. Why, John? With all my years of education and reading, does the answer about how to be a good parent seem to come just from instinct, a seemingly thoughtless process? As I said, the question did not require an answer. And I suspect most everyone here today has had some benefit from her thoughtful insight into our lives and current events. Another memorable encounter with Denny occurred at my parents' 50th anniversary in Skytop in the Poconos. Most of our extended family was there. I was sitting up in the main lodge when someone, I forget who, burst into the lounge looking for me. My aunt had collapsed and was apparently confused. I ran down to her cabin and found her lying down with Denny at her side. Denny had carefully placed her in a supine position on a rug, and to my surprise, had already found her pulse and was able to tell me her heart rate. She assured me there was no evidence of head injury or other body trauma. She said she did not think my aunt was dehydrated because her, quote, skin turgor was good. I do not know whether I was more shocked to find my aunt on the floor or Denny in full control of the situation. I didn't know at the time she was in training or had already earned an EMT certificate and had been rushing off in ambulances to care for the sick and injured in her community. In any event, we figured out that because my aunt was an insulin-dependent diabetic and had not eaten much, she might be in insulin shock. With that thought, Denny hopped up and ran to get a sugar drink. I forgot what she came up with, but my aunt was fortunately able to sip some of the fluid, and within 20 minutes was much better. Denny was every bit as good as any nurse I worked with, and I thought the two of us could handle any future scenario which might develop with my aunt. So we decided to keep her there at the Poconos and not go to the hospital. I also knew that Denny would watch her like a hawk, and she did. Long after I decided my aunt was doing fine, Denny was still giving me hourly reports of her progress. It was very hard for me as a physician to see my medical comrade dying of a disease for which we had no medical cure. And Denny, not surprisingly, proved very strong in the face of the greatest challenge, and she understood her situation better than one would expect from someone so ill. In fact, she was able to concentrate well enough to direct decision-making of how to handle her medical care. When I spoke to her, hoping to offer some words of comfort, she instead comforted me, assuring me she was okay and I need not worry about her. Denny was a remarkable woman, and I now have a new adjective to describe her: heroic.
Thank you. The next letter is from excerpts of a letter, actually, from Luli Adi, who's a Naples friend. She says, "Dear Denny, there have been very few moments when you have not been in my thoughts. You've always been one of my heroes among our friends, and here's why. You speak your mind politely. You know yourself and are not swayed by the winds of faddish fashion. You're generous, loving, and thoughtful. You're a dedicated learner and doer. No wasting time for you, girl. You're an amazing friend. You have a wicked sense of humor. You're smart. If I go on, you'll get a swelled head." This next letter is from Ned Lautenbach, also a longtime Naples friend, and he says, "Fred, I can't imagine you two apart. You were the poster couple, so complimentary of each other and so perfect for each other. Denny was one of the most original, refreshing, and wonderful women I have ever met. I always listened closely to what she had to say because it always was very thoughtful and something that I had not thought of. Denny was interested, caring, and always helping other people. I'll miss her very much. When I read her obituary, I was taken with how her whole life's activities were helping other people. Her time here was very special, a truly remarkable woman." In addition, Ned's wife, Cindy Lautenbach, she would send Denny an email every day, every morning. And it used to be kind of a game, if Denny could get up in time, to see Cindy's email. She called her Cindy L. So one day, she was sending all these emails and saying that she was praying for her, and one day she sent an email and signed off, says, "I'm thinking about you." And so Fred wrote back to Cindy and said, "Hey, really appreciate the thoughts, and I appreciate you thinking about me, but what happened to the praying?" So I promise you, Cindy never quit praying for her, and neither did Ned, but anyway, this next letter is from Lance Odden, who's a retired headmaster at Taft School. He actually held many of the same political views as Denny. He's in New Zealand, or otherwise he would be here today, but a longtime friend since 1970. He referred to Denny as one of the wonders of the world. And his letter was, "Dear Denny, a few thoughts on our years together. When Fred and you arrived at Taft, you were such a breath of fresh thinking and energy, a star on the marvelous Mothers field hockey team, always the bane of Marion's teams, the spokesperson and guide for Planned Parenthood when head nurse Ruth Link and school doctor Basford declared they did not want the girls coming to the infirmary for menstruation issues or counseling on sex, to say nothing of pregnancy. Think of how many kids you saved from tragedy in those early years when we were learning about the full extent of the sexual revolution. We made errors, but you saved us from many more. Remember what a great parent you were when your own kids hit the inevitable bumps in the road of adolescence. You were always there for them and their friends, and also firm in your support of the school's expectations, which is so rare in today's world. And look at what great individuals they have become. In no small way, a reflection of your incredible loving example and care. And then there was the essence of Denny, always yourself, yet deeply respectful of all. Your devotion to the emergency squad in Woodbury, where you were beloved by people the rest of us did not even know, speaks volumes about who you are. Your willingness to call out Freddie, "Oh, Freddie, not again," when he offered a right-of-center opinion. Imagine where he would be politically without your loving resistance. Your willingness to stand on your liberal, inclusive values among so many not so inclined was amazing. Even more so was the fact that everyone loved you for this, even though they thought you had lost your mind. Of course, I loved you because I found a fellow liberal blessed with a great sense of humor, courageous, practical in thought, and generous in spirit. I need not tell you that there are not many of us in these social circles, and you were proudly so. I send this note to testify to what a unique and marvelous friend you have been these many years, the best. With prayers, deep admiration, and love, Lance. You know, speaking of her being liberal, you know, that so many things happened during this last month when the family was going from the hospital to Kate's house, back to the hospital to hospice. And, you know, the blows just kept coming. It was a brutal month, and, you know, they kept getting different diagnoses. And I heard this one story about, you know, she had been diagnosed with cancer, and then later on discovered that it had spread to her brain, and she had a brain tumor. So Kate texted her brother Alex and says, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe what they found on Mom today." She said, "She now has a brain tumor." And about 10 seconds later, a text came back. She said, "Well, at least that explains her voting record." Now, that's a true story. All right, I'd now like to introduce Will Riggs. And Will, he certainly gets the Faraway Award because he's come all the way here from Hong Kong to say goodbye to his beloved Aunt Denny. So I'd like Will Riggs to come forward.
Thanks. Let's see. So a couple weeks ago, Fred asked if I would say something here, and I said yes in a second. Denny has treated me seemingly as if a second son, and so the answer to say something here was obvious. I just wasn't sure what to say. So many memories of Denny and me are just sitting around and talking, laughing. We'd talk kids, travel, China, politics, everything. The list goes on. I mean, this was good, top quality stuff, great conversation. And what I'd love to do is retell one of these funnier episodes. And humor is good at this time, but I just can't capture that humor that came from that special give and take that Denny had with all of us. So I think you know what I'm talking about. Instead, I'm going to let Denny pick the story. I was lucky to speak with Denny by phone when she was calling many of us. And this story came up. So here's the situation. This is my first year in boarding school. It was a rough adjustment, to be honest. Parent Day is coming up. And somehow Denny found out that no one was available to come visit me at boarding school. So if I wasn't going to get family to come visit me at boarding school, Denny, that family, was going to come visit me in boarding school. Like I said, she treated me as if I was a second son. So here I am at boarding school, and my visiting parent is Denny. This is great for me. I love her. I love to spend time together. Now, what should I do with this loving aunt who drove several hours to see me and went through the hours of doing parenty things that you do when visiting a child at school? So this loving, caring aunt asks, do I want anything? You know, something for hockey. She knew me well. My answer, yes. Now, I can't remember if I got skates or gloves, but either way, her good deed was not to go unpunished. No. Denny was going to take me to the hockey store, and I was going to repay her kindness and subject her to hours of trying things on. Plus a touch of indecision to round it all out. Without a word of criticism, Denny sat in that hockey store, waiting as the loving aunt, even trying to answer questions that really only I could answer, like, should I get this? Does this fit? But I valued her opinion. But so Denny was many things to me. A motherly person that drove to see me, honest, critical, straight to the point friend, mentor, motivator. While always on the go, Denny had the capacity for great compassion and patience. She sat through hours of tedious boredom and never let on till years later when the story morphed into one of those running jokes we shared. The time Will subjected his cruel aunt to cruel and unusual punishment. So that in a nutshell is the person that Denny was. Thoughtful, careful, overflowing with enough love to share several times over. She was a dear, dear friend and aunt and was wonderful. So as I was thinking about this, I thought maybe one last thing that you don't have to do it now, but think about some story that you have with Denny, something special, something special to share with Fred, with the kids, with the grandchildren. Think about that. Write that story. Send it to them so it's something that can be shared going forward so that Denny remains with us.
Thank you, Will. This next letter is from Garen Fouth, who is a Naples friend, writing to Fred. Dearest Fred, I've been struggling with finding words to say to you in the simplest manner possible, to express a huge sense of loss and feelings of sadness shared by all of us in this unusually caring community of friends. We are all having a hard time getting our arms around losing our precious Denny. Through her genuine kindness, gentle sense of humor, sharp intellect, and fierce loyalty, Denny raised the bar for all of us. We just wanted to be our best when we were with her. She possessed a particular style and grace that was hers and hers alone. While she never claimed to teach, we learned so much from how she chose to live her life. And together, Fred, you were a great team in all that you shared. We are left heartbroken, but I personally will hold tight the precious gift of self, which Denny gave so generously. Love to you, Kate, and Alex. Garen. During Denny's first week in the hospital, she received two treasured angel ornaments. These angels followed Denny from the hospital to Kate's home and ultimately to the hospice, and they stood vigil by her side. One of the angels came from Paige Hannah, a longtime friend from Old Forge, New York, who's here today, who received her special angel many years ago, and the other angel came from a Naples neighbor and friend, Sally Rohr, along with this note. Dear Denny, decorated the Christmas tree yesterday. Tough to get in the spirit in the high heat and humidity, plus the artificial tree. Nonetheless, our ornaments have wonderful sentimental value and have followed us from state to state. I had the enclosed for as long as I can remember, probably worth less than 50 cents, but the sentiment is $1 million one. I gift it to you to put on your tree this year, wherever that may be, and on your trees for many Christmases to come. Verklempt. Love you, miss you, Sally. And then the family received a note from a hospice worker named Diane Smith. Said, Dear Fred and Kate, I'm still caring for the small evergreen tree that was given to Denny. As for the angels that hung on the tree, they're not supposed to have a physical body, but are mostly thought of as a spirit. They are said to be intermediaries between heaven and earth. Angels protect and guide all people. Angels also carry out God's work. May these angels continue to bring you hope, love, and peace. You are in our thoughts and prayers. Sincerely, Diane Smith. The next is a text from Rob Porter, who is known to many of you as an employee out at the Hole in the Wall, and he's a childhood friend of Alex on the baseball team in Woodbury, Connecticut. He sends this text. I could not hold back the tears as I lowered the flag today. I wouldn't let anyone else do it. I'll make sure it remains lowered tomorrow as well. I'm in complete shock, and we send our prayers to all of you. Ms. Peacock called to inform me personally, and I couldn't even talk. I'm so sorry. This next communication comes from a member of the Largay family, and the Largay family and the Genungs go back for years. They've taken many vacations together. They were on bear boats together. The dads coached hockey together. The kids grew up together. And in fact, Sheila, Ari, and Brian are here today, but this comes from Blair, who was on a sailboat when she got word of Denny's death. Said, our boat is currently anchored in Admiralty Bay, just south of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The bay's open to the west, and we had an incredible sunset last night, including an unmistakable green flash. I was thinking of you all, and I still am. Much love, Blair. And finally, before we have Carol and Ted lead us out, I've written a poem to Denny, and I'd like to share that with you. Denny, our angel, you have to be smiling today to see all these people gathered here and hearing what they had to say. As a friend, mother, grandmother, and wife, you certainly led a meaningful life. Most of us are feeling sad today, but we know you would not want it that way. For throughout your life, it was never about you. And that could be said about very few. You will be missed, cherished, and forever held dear. And for your family, you can relax and do not fear, for they will be supported by a caring group of friends, and that's a promise on which you can depend. We will all forever remember this day and know that you have touched everyone here in a very special way. You made our lives better, and we were all honored to call you a friend. And our memory and love for you will never end. Amen. Okay, before we call Carol and Ted up to lead us out on a special Denny song, I got a couple of administrative announcements. One is there are books in the back, guest books in the back, which the family would love for you to sign because they want to know who's here. And also, if all of you would please stay seated as the family exits the tent, and then they will look forward to visiting with you, and both here at the luncheon and at the picnic and tonight. And on behalf of the Genung and Taylor family, we thank everyone for being here. I know Denny is looking down on us and smiling and you know, so happy that she has attended this celebration of her life. So I'd like to now call Carol and Ted Price up to take us home.
Are you ready? She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain as she makes her way to heaven. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be rowing in her guideboat when she comes. She'll be rowing in her guideboat when she comes. She'll be rowing in her guideboat, keeping her trunks afloat, rowing in driving her mama wagon, singing, don't be sad, don't be crying, promise when you get here by and by. She'll be wearing pearls and cashmere when she goes. She'll be wearing pearls and cashmere when she goes. She'll be wearing pearls and cashmere, holding friends and family dear, wearing pearls and cashmere when she goes. Oh, she's on her way to glory, hallelujah. Oh, she's on her